Welcome back to our channel for another deep dive into the dramatic world of Los Angeles fashion and romance. Today is a beautiful day to unpack the latest, jaw-dropping twists, so let us jump right into the explosive secrets threatening to tear our favorite families apart. The glittering facade of the Los Angeles fashion world has always been a masterclass in concealing dark, devastating truths, but the current atmosphere at Forrester Creations is thick with a suffocating, almost palpable tension. In the aftermath of the catastrophic Monaco trip, the landscape of two prominent marriages has been irrevocably altered. Steffy Forrester Finnegan, having fled the French Riviera in a state of absolute trauma after discovering her husband's secret, packed with the manipulative Sheila Carter, sought solace in the bottom of a glass and the comforting arms of a grieving friend. That friend was Carter Walton, a man whose own world had just been shattered by his wife Daphne's devastating infertility diagnosis and her subsequent impulsive flight to Paris. Bound by their shared heartbreak, their mutual feelings of betrayal, and the heavy, intoxicating influence of alcohol, Steffy and Carter crossed the ultimate line on the couch of the Forrester's CEO office. It was a night of desperate passion born from profound pain, a catastrophic mistake that they both immediately swore to bury in the deepest recesses of their minds. However, the universe has a cruel way of ensuring that buried secrets eventually claw their way back to the surface. Steffy has recently managed to orchestrate a fragile reconciliation with John Finn Finnegan. Finn, consumed by guilt over his monumental error in judgment regarding his biological mother, has been overcompensating in the most agonizing way possible. He constantly places Steffy on a pedestal, showering her with praise for her unwavering honesty, her purity of heart, and her fierce dedication to their family. Every single compliment from her devoted husband acts as a psychological dagger to Steffy's conscience. She smiles through the suffocating guilt, hypocritically accepting his apologies while desperately trying to scrub the memory of Carter's touch from her skin. Steffy believed that if she just played the part of the forgiving, loyal wife well enough, the nightmare of her infidelity would eventually fade into a distant, untouchable memory. Fate, however, had a far more sinister plan in store for the Forrester heiress. The relentless stress and the emotional whiplash of the past few weeks began to manifest in physical ways. The lingering exhaustion, the sudden bouts of morning sickness, and the terrifying realization of a missed cycle sent Steffy into a spiral of absolute, paralyzing panic. Locked inside the pristine bathroom of the Cliff House, with Finn completely oblivious in the other room, Steffy stared down at a plastic pregnancy test. The two pink lines that materialized before her eyes did not bring the joy of a new life. They brought the horrifying, apocalyptic dread of total destruction. The timeline was undeniable, and the sickening truth washed over her like ice water. This baby was not conceived in a moment of reconciled love with her husband. This child was the undeniable, biological consequence of her drunken, passionate night with Carter Walton. The sheer magnitude of this discovery threatens to break Steffy's mind. She is carrying the physical evidence of her ultimate betrayal, a ticking time bomb growing inside her that will eventually become visible to the entire world. If Finn discovers the truth, the SINN marriage, a union that has survived shootings, memory loss, and the relentless interference of Sheila Carter, will be permanently and violently destroyed. Finn's absolute adoration would instantaneously curdle into disgust and heartbreak. Furthermore, the scandal would rock Forrester Creations to its core, providing endless ammunition for her rivals and forever tarnishing her reputation. Steffy is a woman who prides herself on control, on being the fierce protector of her family's legacy, and now she finds herself trapped in a claustrophobic nightmare of her own making, desperately searching for an escape route where none seems to exist. Simultaneously, across town, another tragedy is unfolding, one that is intimately connected to Steffy's current nightmare. Daphne Rose Walton has returned from her impulsive exile in Paris, having realized that running away from her severe infertility and premature menopause diagnosis was a mistake. She has returned to Carter with a renewed, desperate determination to fight for their marriage and to explore every possible alternative path to parenthood. Daphne's functional depression has morphed into a frantic, obsessive quest for a medical miracle. Dr. Lee Finnegan's diagnosis was definitive regarding Daphne's inability to conceive naturally, pushing the couple toward the arduous, emotionally draining process of in vitro fertilization and surrogacy. However, to make this dream a reality, Daphne is in desperate need of an egg donor. Carter is living in his own psychological prison. He is profoundly relieved that his beloved wife has returned to him, but he is simultaneously drowning in a sea of toxic guilt. He looks into Daphne's hopeful, tear-filled eyes as she researches fertility clinics and donor profiles, knowing that while she was in Paris grieving their lost future, he was committing the ultimate sin with her best friend. Carter, a man whose entire identity is built upon a foundation of legendary integrity and moral righteousness, is crumbling under the weight of his hypocrisy. He wants nothing more than to give Daphne the family she so desperately craves, to heal the deep wounds her diagnosis inflicted. But every conversation about their future feels like a betrayal, tainted by the dark secret he shares with Steffy. It is within this volatile crucible of desperation, guilt, and fear that Steffy's survival instincts kick into overdrive. Her mind, trained in the ruthless, high-stakes world of corporate warfare, begins to formulate a plan so audacious, so twisted, and so incredibly dangerous that it borders on madness. Steffy realizes that she cannot hide a growing pregnancy, nor can she pass the child off as Finn's given the specific timing of their estrangement and reconciliation. But what if she did not have to hide the pregnancy? What if she could completely control the narrative, transforming the evidence of her infidelity into a shining beacon of selfless love? The idea strikes her with the force of a lightning bolt. She will offer to be the egg donor and the surrogate for Daphne and Carter. Steffy's Machiavellian master plan is a masterpiece of psychological manipulation and self-preservation. By convincing Daphne to accept her egg and her womb, Steffy can carry Carter's biological child in plain sight. She can explain her growing belly to Finn and the rest of the world as a profoundly generous, humanitarian act, the ultimate sacrifice made to help her devastated best friend achieve the dream of motherhood. Under this meticulously crafted guise, the baby would legally and socially belong to Carter and Daphne. Steffy would hand over the child, burying the truth of its conception forever. In her desperate, panicked mind, this is the perfect solution. It saves her marriage to Finn, it gives Daphne the baby she is crying out for, and it absolves Steffy of the need to ever confess her drunken betrayal. With a terrifying resolve, Steffy approaches a highly vulnerable Daphne with the proposition. She frames the offer with tears in her eyes, speaking of their deep bond, of her heartbreak over Daphne's infertility struggles, and of her overwhelming desire to give the Waltons the family they deserve. Daphne, completely blinded by her desperation and her absolute trust in her friend, is overwhelmed by the gesture. She views Steffy as a literal angel, a savior descending to rescue her from the depths of her depression. The tragic irony of Daphne weeping with gratitude, thanking Steffy for her selfless sacrifice while remaining entirely oblivious to the sinister, self-serving truth behind the offer, creates a scene of agonizing dramatic tension. Daphne eagerly accepts, believing that this is the beautiful, miraculous answer to all her prayers. However, the true obstacle to Steffy's twisted scheme is not Daphne, but the father of the child himself. When Steffy corners Carter behind the closed, soundproof doors of the Forrester's CEO office to reveal her pregnancy and her proposed solution, the blood completely drains from his face. Carter is struck by a wave of absolute, paralyzing horror. as Steffi frantically details the logistics of the fake surrogacy, outlining how they will forge medical documents and manipulate the timeline to make it appear as a legitimate IVF procedure. Carter stares at her as if he is looking at a stranger. The sheer audacity, the cold, calculating nature of the plan repulses him to his very core. Carter fiercely and violently opposes the idea. He has already compromised his legendary morals by sleeping with Steffi and hiding the affair, but this proposition crosses a line into a realm of deception that he cannot stomach. To look his fragile, recovering wife in the eye and hand her a child that was conceived through his own infidelity, all while allowing her to believe it is a beautiful medical miracle gifted by a selfless friend, is a level of psychological cruelty that Carter refuses to inflict. He argues passionately that building their long-awaited family on a foundation of such a catastrophic, labyrinthine lie will ultimately destroy them all. He demands that they face the consequences of their actions, arguing that the truth, no matter how devastating, is better than a lifetime of suffocating deceit. Steffi, however, is a cornered animal fighting for her life, and she unleashes a ruthless counterattack. She challenges Carter's sudden resurgence of morality, pointing out the hypocrisy of his stance. If he is so committed to the truth, she demands, why hasn't he confessed to Daphne already? Steffi ruthlessly outlines the reality of their situation. If Carter blows the whistle and reveals the pregnancy and the affair, he will not just be clearing his conscience. He will be dropping a nuclear bomb on both of their lives. Daphne's fragile mental health, already hanging by a thread due to her infertility trauma, would be permanently shattered by the dual betrayal of her husband and her best friend. Finn, the man who has loved and defended Steffi unconditionally, would be destroyed. Tefamila's would be reduced to ash in an instant. The Forrester CEO office becomes the battleground for a suffocating, high-stakes psychological war between two desperate secret keepers. Steffi uses every weapon in her arsenal, manipulating Carter's deep love for Daphne and his paralyzing fear of causing her further pain. She argues that her plan, while built on a lie, is the only path that results in everyone getting what they want. Daphne gets her baby, Carter gets his family, and Finn gets to keep his wife. Steffi tries to convince him that the deception is a necessary evil, a heavy burden they must silently bear to protect the innocent people they love. She paints a picture of a future where they can all be happy, provided Carter can just swallow his guilt and play along with the charade. Carter is trapped in a waking nightmare, caught between the crushing weight of his guilt and the terrifying reality of Steffi's logic. He knows that exposing the truth will cause insurmountable, irreparable damage, but the thought of participating in this twisted surrogacy scheme makes him physically ill. He watches Daphne excitedly browse baby clothes and research prenatal vitamins, her eyes alight with a joy he hasn't seen in months, and he feels his heart breaking into a million pieces. He is being forced to choose between destroying his wife with the truth or deceiving her with a lie so profound it threatens to consume his soul. As the days pass and Steffi's pregnancy slowly advances, the ticking clock adds an unbearable pressure to their claustrophobic dynamic. They are forced to interact in public, maintaining the facade of supportive friends and colleagues while engaging in a silent, vicious war of wills behind closed doors. Every glance shared across the Forrester boardroom is laden with unspoken threats and desperate pleas. Steffi remains unyielding, her survival instinct overriding any moral hesitation, while Carter desperately searches for a third option that simply does not exist. The tension is a coiled spring, wound so tight that it is practically vibrating, threatening to snap and unleash a wave of destruction that will forever alter the landscape of their lives. This is no longer just a story about a drunken mistake. It has evolved into a dark, complex thriller about the lengths to which people will go to protect their carefully constructed lives. Steffi's willingness to manipulate the sacred concept of surrogacy to cover her tracks showcases a chilling, pragmatic ruthlessness, while Carter's agonizing moral paralysis highlights the tragic consequences of a single moment of weakness. As Daphne joyfully prepares for a medical procedure that is nothing more than a theatrical cover-up, and Finn continues to unknowingly praise the woman who is orchestrating this massive deception, the stage is set for an inevitable, catastrophic explosion. The truth is a relentless force, and in the world of Los Angeles fashion, no secret, no matter how meticulously buried under the guise of a humanitarian act, can remain hidden forever. The countdown to the ultimate reckoning has begun, and when the dust finally settles, nothing will ever be the same again.